This is the book, Sovereignty or Submission, Will Americans Rule Themselves or Be Ruled by Others? We've all heard the slogan, global problems require global solutions. The concept of global governance is in the air. And I think we're going to hear this. This is going to be a rallying cry of what I call transnational progressives, or the Western progressive left. And we see this today. In the next couple of weeks, we see with the European Union. Essentially, the lights are going out in Europe as far as democracy is concerned. Rich Lowry has a great piece today in National Review Online, talking about the piece is entitled "Post-Democracy." Essentially, Europe is moving toward a post-democratic system as the democratic nation states, as the fiscal union comes into being, or it moves in that direction. It looks like that direction that they're heading. Well, there is, in the book, I point out that essentially there's three, I think, national security challenges to the United States. I focus on one in the book, but we all know about radical Islam, and Frank, of course, and all of you here have been doing a terrific job highlighting the broad strategic challenge to the United States from radical Islam, and of course the rise of China. These are both external challenges, and I have in the book, I discuss the third challenge, which I call the party of global governance. The global governance coalition is also a challenge to American constitutionalism. In a sense, it's an existential challenge. I mean, it challenges the existence of the American constitutional regime. Obviously, this challenge is both external and internal. External in the sense of the UN, the EU, the international organizations, the International Criminal Court, and so on, and internal, which is really the biggest challenge, is which from American progressives, and probably includes most of the foreign policy establishment, who believe in the establishment of global norms, that we do need essentially to cede sovereignty to global institutions, to international institutions. You hear this morning, noon, and night from, the Council on Foreign Relations and the entire, which I spoke over there a couple of months ago, and they said, well, don't we have to give up some sovereignty? I mean, isn't that what we have to do? So you hear this, and this is part of it. And so when we elect a Republican administration, there's going to be a challenge because it really will require an intellectual revolution in thinking about foreign policy. The global governance has to be one of those challenges. And what do you do? Because there's Americans involved and so on. And one of my the points of the book, of course, is this is not a conspiracy. I'm not talking about the black helicopters or some secret meeting of the Bilderbergers or anything of this nature. If you want to learn about global governance, just go on the internet and look up, for example, the American Bar Association's, how they say the United States should comply with the CEDAW Treaty, the UN Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Beijing Women's Conference Treaty. And the American Bar Association has a 200-page book-size discussion of how the United States would have to comply with CEDAW. And if you look at it, it's support for what's called substantive equality. It's essentially equality of result. Quote as, the Bar Association asks questions such as this here. What training programs exist to educate judges and other legal professionals about CEDAW's precedence over national law? So are judges being trained to learn that CEDAW is preferable to national law? And then that's the procedural question. And the substance is there a national machinery for the state, for the nation state, to track budgetary expenditures? In other words, women are 51% of the population, are 51% of all federal budget items spent for the promotion of women's equality. If you look at the Children's Treaty, there's similar questions when the UN monitors go to Ireland. They ask, what was your budget child-proof and gender-proof? These are the questions that UN monitors ask the countries when they visit. Well, the issue is always brought up, well, this is voluntary. We can say no, and so on. Well, what will happen, of course, in the United States is we have a litigious system, is they will bring the ACLU, the American Bar Association's International Law Division, will bring lawsuits to enforce it. So the big issue here is I'm not so worried about the UN and the UN and the EU and the International Criminal Court. They're not going to come here and force us to do anything. The big challenge is going to become internally from American progressives. They're the people that are going to be saying we have to follow international law. How can we violate international law? And of this group of what I call transnational progressives, there are probably two groups. One is we call special interest activists, and the other are the more sophisticated foreign policy specialists. The special interest groups, you can know, I think at this point Amnesty International wants to arrest George W. Bush on his trip. They're saying Canadian government should arrest him. So this is, a couple of years ago they were saying Rumsfeld should have been arrested during his trip to France. So groups such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the ACLU, will be pushing for the acceptance of international law internally as a special interest group. If you look at the Durban Conference, right before the Durban Conference, 47 American human rights groups sent a letter to Mary Robinson, the UN Human Rights Commissioner, said, we're not getting our anti-discrimination laws how we want in the United States. We call on the United Nations. This was the exact words of this petition they sent. We call on the United Nations to help us with the American system. And signing this were people from the ACLU, as I said, the Arab American Institute, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, and the leader was Wade Henderson of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights. Most of you on the Hill here run into him all the time. He's always testifying on the Hill. So these were the special interest groups that will be pushing this line of America has to conform to all of these treaties that we haven't signed or haven't ratified, and we have to conform to international law as they define international law, not real international law. The more sophisticated arguments will be this argument for engagement, given basically by Obama appointees, by Harold Koh, who's the general counsel for the State Department, the top legal advisor of the State Department. Anne Marie Slaughter just left the administration, but she was at the State Department. Catherine Powell is there. There's a whole Michael Posner is at the State Department, the Office of Human Rights. All of these Obama appointees have spent their entire careers arguing that global norms are superior to the Constitution or should be incorporated in the Constitution. And their argument will be, the argument used by Democratic senators then will be, this is America's leadership role. America should take the leadership in promoting global governance because it's in our interest to do so. This is the argument we'll hear, and it's essentially a declinist argument. And they basically say this, that with China and other powers emerging, it's important now for us, the United States, to lock in global norms while we're in this position of hegemony and superiority, because we won't always be in this position. So let's lock it in now, and then 30, 40 years from now, when some other power, perhaps China or Brazil or whatever it is, some other rising power is in a position of at least authority, or at least multilaterally so, the Fried-Zachary argument, we will then be protected because they will have internalized these norms and accepted them. Well, of course, this is purely, this makes no sense. Once they're in a position, if they did happen to be in a position of authority, they would, of course, not follow the laws or the rules that America developed 20 years before. As Charles de Gaulle said, treaties and these types of agreements are like roses and young girls. They're at a particular stage when they're there, and then they change. And this period, and it'll at that point, these treaties would no longer be valid. But my general point is this is a big argument. We should be prepared with these arguments, and we should actually send these arguments into battle, in a sense. We shouldn't simply wait until the other side seizes the initiative, but I think we have at a core. We stand for American sovereignty, and many on the left do not. And when Michael Posner comes up as Assistant Secretary of State, he should be quizzed. There should be relentless grilling of these people. You wrote this. We did a little of that with Harold Koh, and we succeeded in getting 34 votes against him, and he said, well, if I was a treaty, I wouldn't have been confirmed. So he didn't get his two-thirds. So that probably scares him off for the Supreme Court. But there's all kinds of other people who are coming up. And we should take this offensive. We know that Obama doesn't believe in American exceptionalism, or he has a very strange view of it. Americans are just like Greeks or Brits. Everybody believes in their own exceptionalism, so this is obviously not. He doesn't. And we should basically say, well, you believe that global solutions require global problems. What does that have to do with the Constitution? What type of authority would you cede? Steve is going to come up next, and he'll probably get into some of the weeds on some of these treaties, which in most cases require the diminution of sovereignty. So that I think is I'm going to end up here because 10 minutes are up. That's the goal for, I think, American conservatism, for our view, for the American center right, is we have to essentially change this whole foreign policy establishment has a mindset of following and joining all of these global institutions they see as positive. The International Criminal Court, not NATO, which is positive, but all the other institutions, and they favor ceding sovereignty. And I think the broad, vast majority of the American people are with us, not with them, and we should seize this as an issue. It's going to be an issue, and not simply be on the defensive, but be on the offensive. Thanks. I think then we have.